Hello everyone, I'm Don Keelan and this is The Truth of the Matter. I'm privileged today to have with me the Honorable Christopher Louras, Mayor of the City of Rutland. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks, happy to be down here.
Can you tell us a little bit about Rutland? Because you're
Sure.
outside of our county, and just to give our viewers a snapshot of Rutland.
Quick snapshot, Rutland is about 7.5, 8 square miles and has a population of 16,495 folks in that 8 square miles. It is the donut hole that is surrounded by the town of Rutland, 2 distinct municipalities. So when you drive from the southern part of the state, up Route 7 into Rutland, the area where all the big box stores are, that's Rutland town. And then when you get into the downtown area, that's Rutland City. So we are surrounded. We are now the 5th largest community in the state. I like to qualify it as we are the largest community outside of Chittenden County, which is true, and really represent, I think, just like Bennington and Springfield, Barry, the heart and soul of Vermont, much more than Chittenden County does.
Right.
So,
and Rutland at one time was a major manufacturing center, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, it's gone through changes from the mid 1800s as a railroad town and an industrial center for not unlike Danby for marble production, and then before World War II, it had transitioned to an industrial town, not unlike the mill towns on the eastern side of the state. Post World War II, those declined, and right now the largest employer in the city of Rutland, with over 1,000 employees, is General Electric Aviation. They make compressor blades. And the second largest employer is the Rutland Regional Medical Center with 1,000 employees.
And we're very familiar with that hospital down here. I think a number of residents of Bennington County do go to Rutland Center.
Indeed, and I think likewise General Electric has employees that live down here.
You and your colleagues have had to deal with a number of issues over the last few years, and stemming from that has been Project Vision.
Yes.
And we've heard a lot about that down here, and I know you've traveled quite a bit to other municipalities, and I know you just come back from Atlanta.
Atlanta. They asked us to go down there to a press conference on heroin.
And we had seen that here, that you were meeting with the people of Fulton County, I believe. And could you share with us a little bit what is Project Vision and how has that helped Rutland?
Sure. Project Vision was a response to the heroin crisis that's really been affected all of New England and also the Pacific Northwest predominantly. It's moving to other parts of the country now, and that's why we were called to Atlanta, because they dealt with the crack epidemic down there and then the methamphetamine epidemic, and now they're starting to see a real growth like we saw here in prescription opiates and heroin. So in Rutland, Project Vision was a response to the quality of life crimes that were associated with the opiate addiction. It was under the leadership of then Chief of Police James Baker, who's from Arlington. After he left the Vermont State Police as the colonel, we began to recognize we couldn't arrest a way out of the problem, and it needed to take an entire community response. So we worked with individuals in academia, our research partners, and asked them, and they determined that we could use the same strategies that drove down drug-related homicides in inner cities, Boston, Baltimore, New York, use those same strategies to drive down quality of life crimes associated with the heroin epidemic in Rutland. And that's been the goal of Project Vision, is to reduce the chaos in the neighborhoods, in the schools, in our families that have been torn apart by the heroin epidemic. As I said, it's not just Rutland, it's the entire state of Vermont and the entire New England area as well.
Are you doing this internally, meaning you're funding it internally, or are you getting assistance from the state, or are you getting assistance from the government?
That's a great question. And the answer is we're doing it internally with no additional costs at all. We're just working smarter. It's the premise is collaboration for the greater good, and we've brought in stakeholders from the federal government, law enforcement, a prosecutor at the federal level, the marshal's office, drug enforcement, FBI, from the state level, not just law enforcement through the Drug Task Force and the Vermont State Police, but the social service agencies. One of our best partners is Department of Corrections. Also working with Department of Children and Families, and also the designated agencies to provide social services by the state, specifically Rutland Mental Health for those individuals who need the mental health support to help overcome their addictions, as well as domestic violence providers, family counselors, where we've broken down the silos of all those disparate players and getting everybody talking to each other and sharing information. The result has been, over the last 2 years, we've driven down burglaries by over 50%, driven down larcenies, shoplifting by in excess of 40%, driven down disorderly conduct calls, and that's the chaos in our neighborhoods, by over 30%. And on the social side, we've seen a reduction in children born to opiate-addicted mothers by almost 40%. Seen that reduction over the last couple of years. So it's a holistic, comprehensive approach that recognizes everyone in the community needs to be working together, all the stakeholders, all the organizations, law enforcement, state, fed, nonprofits, to work towards the same goal, and we've seen some great outcomes from that.
When that is done in Rutland, and you're having success with it, is the success partially measured by the fact that the problem has then shifted to other places in Vermont?
That's a great question, and the answer to that is no, because we've determined that through our research partners, specifically David Kennedy from the National Network of Safe Communities at John Jay College, and also he has a colleague in Harvard in Boston who we are working with. And with the type of strategy we created, and this has been validated by our partners in academia, it doesn't displace the problem. If it gets tamped down in Rutland, if you do it the right way, it doesn't pop up someplace else. It's not whack-a-mole. It's not like squeezing a balloon and it pops up someplace else.
That's what I was.
Yeah, and that's not the case. If you can dismantle the infrastructure that's in place of the very low-level dealers and users, you dismantle that infrastructure, it can't be displaced someplace else. Here's an example. If an individual either from outside of the state or somebody from inside of the state brings into Vermont 1,000 bags of heroin, and they don't have a social network to plug into to distribute that at a low level, if we can dismantle that infrastructure, they're not going to set up shop on the corner of Center Street and Merchants Row in Rutland and start dealing on the street in hand-to-hands, because that's just not the nature of the drug market in Vermont. It's all very discreet. It's behind closed doors. It's in apartments. It's where people decide to meet. And if you dismantle that ability for those people to share information, then you can dismantle the infrastructure that's needed. That doesn't necessarily translate to driving down use, because we really don't know how many people are using. But what it does do is it drives down the crimes and the chaos associated with the addiction. And part of it is also ensuring that there are treatment options where there are consequences. We offer people services, support, tell them they're important to the community, tell them they're important community members, and tell them here are the tools and resources you need to get well. But if you don't, we have a very robust law enforcement presence with our state, local, and federal partners all working together. So it's a carrot and stick approach.
Do you feel it's been successful so far, the program?
Yes,
Now, have you been asked to transfer that or help with other municipalities in,
Yeah.
in Vermont?
That's called a roadshow, so the answer is yes.
Okay.
So go ahead and finish your question.
I was going to ask because we've had a rash of robberies here in Bennington County, particularly down in Bennington. I'm sure there's a few more you can relate over to Springfield and Brattleboro.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if those communities, they all seem like they have the same issue. Have they adopted what Rutland has?
Somewhere on that path, we've taken our show on the road to Virgins, to Swanton, St. Albans area, to St. Johnsbury, to Hartford, White River Junction, to Springfield, and very recently also to Londonderry. The only requirement we have internally is, because it takes a lot of time and resources for us to go on the road, is we request that any community that wants to see what we're doing, that they come to Rutland first, demonstrate that level of commitment that they want to learn from us. And when a small number of stakeholders or partners from that community come to Rutland, see what we're doing and say, yeah, we want to learn from you, we really request that they put together a larger group, a large community group like we did in Rutland, and then we'll go on the road to tell them exactly how we've done it. But it's been a 3-year program. Chief Baker, Jim Baker, started it out in the spring and summer of 2012, and we really got it going in 2013.
To my viewers, I'd just like to announce that with me this morning is Christopher Louras, the mayor of Rutland. Chris was a graduate of UVM. He served 10 years in the Army as a helicopter test pilot on the C-47s, I believe.
Yep, CH-47.
CH-47s. And you served time as a alderman, a state rep, and you've been mayor of the city since 2007. Chris and his family, your wife Judy and 4 boys, is
yes.
it? So you have a vested interest in Rutland.
Indeed.
And you therefore have a seat at the table by having a family and 4 boys, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and a family-owned business that I came from to this job. So we understand it from a small businessman's perspective as well.
So you have quite a vested interest and quite a history of being in Rutland. Tell me, in Montpelier now, the Senate is debating Senate 291 legislation. I believe it's 291, or is it 241? And 241, excuse me.
Yep.
And the bill number Senate 95. Just to lump it all together, it's the regulation, taxation, cultivation of marijuana. How do you feel about that? And both as a father, as a mayor, and as a member of the League of Cities and Towns.
Yep.
So can you share that with?
Yeah, I will only speak to this from a very professional standpoint. Leave my personal feelings at the door. As a mayor of a community that has been dealing with the fallout, the problems, the challenges associated with the opiate crisis, and recognizing the effects that all substance abuse has on a community itself, the fact that it tears families apart, tears neighborhoods apart, and really rips at the fabric of every community. I believe that going down the road of legalization for marijuana is a monumental mistake. That position is bolstered and supported by the lessons learned from Colorado. During the last year, that's what we've heard is, let's learn from Colorado, learn from their mistakes, learn from the challenges, learn from those who've gone first. Quebec and Colorado and Washington State. And the data, not the opinions, not conjecture, the hard data that came from Colorado and continues to come from Colorado reflects that legalization is, as I said, a monumental mistake for the Vermont society.
Let me interrupt you there. When you say the data, and you've done a lot of research on this.
Yes.
When you the data, what is the actual data that's coming
Well, the place where it's been compiled in a very objective manner and looking at all areas of society in Colorado comes from the Rocky Mountain High Intensity Drug Traffic Area Reports of 2012, 13, and 14, which were put out in the years 2013, 14, 15. They've completed 3 volumes using data going all the way back to 2009. So as Colorado moved from medicalization to decriminalization to full legalization, they started collecting data back in 2009. And that's one thing that we really haven't been doing in Vermont, unfortunately, is setting that baseline. And they did in Colorado going back to 2009 to measure the effects on the state through medicalization or medicinal marijuana, through decriminalization, where you decide you're not going to arrest people for having a small quantity or just give them a civil ticket rather than arrest, through legalization. And the data they've been looking at are the effects, have been measuring the effects on youth prevalence of marijuana use, because that's where the real effects are physiologically, and we can get into that in a little bit. So the youth increases of use, the increase of hospitalization and ER visits, the increase of traffic deaths, the increase of homelessness, and the increase in, and this is opposite from what they thought was going to happen, the increase in prevalence of black market sales and the drug traffic organizations, the gangs, associated with marijuana legalization. And the data is conclusive that if you will, the deleterious effects of legalization of marijuana has been seen across the entire spectrum in Colorado. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you now. The Senate Operations Committee, I believe, or the Senate Judiciary Committee is looking. The Senate Operations Committee worked this when the session was out. Did their work and now passed it on to the judiciary. Has this data that you're talking about been presented to them? Do they have this in front of them?
Well, I know last year I testified, and it was remotely during a large, statewide hearing process to this information. Unfortunately, there are committee chairs who have decided that they don't want to hear and are done listening to the data. During the summer, the committee chair explicitly said she didn't want to listen to the opposing side. So the message to the constituency in Vermont has been, don't tell us why we shouldn't do it. Tell us how to make it better, how we can mitigate the negative effects if it becomes legalized. And that's starting from a wrong place in my mind. We should determine whether or not it's even wise to do. That's why you've heard a lot of language in Montpelier saying, let's take a go slow approach. If we're going to do this, let's wait and get a few more years' data from Colorado. And unfortunately, that message is not carrying the day. But as I said, the impact on youth in Colorado has been significant, where in Colorado, the prevalence of youth marijuana use has put now Colorado at the top of the list throughout all the states in the country, according to federal data from SAMHSA, that Colorado now has the greatest prevalence of youth smoking. Why that's a problem is not just because it's spiked the expulsions and the suspensions in school, but now that there has been the medicalization and the decrim, research community has been started to really drill into the effects of marijuana, especially on the developing brain. King's College in London, Harvard, Northwestern as examples, the research bodies associated with those top-tier academic facilities and research facilities, have determined that the hippocampus, part of the brain that regulates and provides for memory, and another part of the brain that regulates for emotion, have seen marked decreases in size, volume, mass associated with people who, specifically the young teenage boys, 16 to 24-year-old males, who use marijuana regularly. Problem with that is you're affecting the developing brain in young men when that they should be learning rather than.
Is it more powerful marijuana today than it was back in the 60s?
That's the other piece, is the medical response. ER visits and hospitalization admittance has really spiked, and we could go over those numbers here, but we don't need to belabor that, because this higher grade marijuana is providing for, and this has been backed up with research, incidents of psychoses. You know, it's not the green stuff that people like me smoked in college 30 years ago. This potency does translate to psychotic events.
Is that all offset by or mitigated by the fact that if the state can reap the benefits of taxation, and also it would employ thousands would gain employment? Is there a school of thought saying that, yes, we're going to have issues over here, but they're going to be mitigated or going to be compensated by the fact the revenues to the state, which the state obviously needs a lot of revenue, will be compensated? No,
as a matter of fact, it's just the opposite. The Colorado governor, what's called the marijuana czar, he's his lead policy guy on marijuana, has said that, he said explicitly that taxation is a panacea, that all the money that's brought in from marijuana sales, first, it hasn't met the level they thought it was going to meet, but all the money that's brought in is used to administer the program. So there's no money left over. There's no net. And that's what the governor's immediate staffer has said that. As far as the other areas of where it's talked about that provides for jobs and other impacts, positive impacts to the economy, one other unintended consequence in Colorado is that it takes a lot of resources, a lot of water, a lot of power, and a lot of space to grow it at the extent they're growing it. And it has taken away from the ability of conventional industry to find real estate and especially warehousing and distribution assets.
Let me ask you this then. And because you mentioned earlier that your family has a business, or you came from a family business, and likewise, not a family, but I've been in business for a long time. One of the things we learn in business, you don't take on a new project if you have things out of order in what you're producing now.
That's a good point.
And I look at the state of Vermont, and I'm looking at Act 46. I'm looking at a major budget deficit. I'm looking at an Affordable Health Care Act that's, according to Vermont Digger, as recently as the other day, is going backwards. And a host of other issues, including a major environmental cleanup that they're going to be putting on in various cities and towns in Vermont to clean up the drainage into the waterways. Where's the pressure coming from for the state to be so engrossed in this new issue, which is going to take so much to control? You've been in the legislature.
Not to dodge the question, but I've got no idea. I really don't know, especially when it's clear that we should take a go slow approach and to learn even more from the.
I'm just saying, regardless of which part of the issue you stand on, why? I mean, and he's a wonderful legislator, Senator Sears, is leading the charge in this area, and that came out yesterday, almost like he's ready to support it in his conference with the governor. I mean, he comes from a city, or not a city, a town, that has so many issues that have been unresolved. You go down to Bennington, and the housing, the deterioration of housing, the deterioration of businesses, the lack of jobs down there, and of obviously the drug and homeless issue. Why would anyone want to take on more until you resolve those issues? I'm at a loss.
Me too. I can't wrap my head around it. As a matter of fact, I use that as a reason as to why, another reason why we shouldn't do this. I mean, we know there are ill effects of drinking and driving right now. We know there are ill effects of the prescription drug crisis, the opiate crisis. Individuals, clearly argue that there's also effects of the use of tobacco. So if we were to look at all the bad things that are happening in society associated with all forms of substance abuse, alcohol, legal drugs, prescription drugs, illegal drugs, and it's at a certain level, why would we take an action, marijuana legalization, that it's not going to be a no-sum game? There are going to be more ill effects after legalization. Yeah. So I'm at a loss as to why we would do something that's going to create more problems for us.
You're part of the Mayor's Council of Vermont.
Yes.
Or I may use the wrong description there, but I know there are eight of you.
Yep, the Mayor's Coalition.
Mayor's Coalition,
yeah.
Thank you. And you recently met, and you didn't come out unanimously against this issue or for this issue.
Let's just say that was there were several. There was a disparity of opinion as to what way we should go. It was a pretty significant conflict in the room, and because of the Mayor's Coalition, we decided that there are some issues that affect all of us as communities that have the larger communities with the mayor's form of government. And we will only rally around those issues where we have agreement, because there's so many places where we agree. And if there's something we don't agree on, we're just going to put that to the side. And let's just say that on this issue, there was clear lines of demarcation as far as supporting versus non-supporting legalization.
You're also, I want to get quick because we don't have a lot of time
Yeah.
left. You're a part of the League of Cities and Towns.
Yes.
And has that organization, and I've done work for them in the past, and with Wendy Wilton as
Yes.
your treasurer up there. Has the League of Cities and Town come out with a position
The
on
League has a very, very formal position, which was the same position we had last year. So for last year's legislative session, we review our positions each year, and the League of Cities and Towns is clear and concise that it's the policy of the League to oppose legalization.
So, having been in the legislature, do you is there an outside force also, lobbyists from outside the state pushing this? And
yeah, this is a national push for NORML.
Because we're a small
is the name
state.
of the organization. We're a small state, but there's a recognition that a willing state. But there are ways, and there are stakeholders in the state who can band together to really push back. And I see the two organizations and the two types of organization: educators and the hospitals, the medical community. I think they need to be at the forefront, leading the opposition along with the League and along with law enforcement.
Last month we had the local hospital executives on here, and they're trying to get that organization to take that position.
Yeah.
I want to ask, is there anything else that I have not asked that you'd like to contribute to this issue? And let me, if I can interrupt.
Yeah.
How do you think it's going to come out this session?
Oh boy.
Unfair question, probably.
I don't know at this point. It still has a lot to go through. You have someone like Senator Sears, one place where even though he had an agreement with the governor yesterday on certain portions, he's still drawing a line in the sand on homegrown.
Yeah.
Where he's saying, if we're going to regulate it, it's going to be regulated. We can't regulate it if people grow it at home. There are some individuals on the pro side who support legalization, who find that position offensive and a non-starter. So there's still going to be fights going along the way where you could have a number of senators who say, I'll vote for legalization, but we can't have it, we can't be homegrown, and then others say we're only going to do it if it is homegrown, and then you're going to have some who don't want to do it at all. It could really make for strange bedfellows, and you never know how it's going to end when that happens.
I'd like to get a commitment from you that I can have you back here later in the spring when the legislature does go out, and let's see what transpired.
Well, let's
in the
do that.
meantime, Mayor, I want to present to you the Wounded Warrior Challenge coin in connection with
thank
your
you.
service to our country.
Well, I appreciate that.
And thank you very much.
Yes,
Good
sir.
having you with us.
Thank you very, very much.
And to my viewers, thank you for viewing us today. Be with us today. And until next time, I'm Don Keelan.